What? What's going on, guys? It's your boy, Big Blue Drew 97 here today to give my thoughts, or should I say, tell you a theory that I have, because recently, One Piece chapter dropped recently, where we got a lot of information about, or not really a lot of information, but like a lot of like possibilities for theories. Primarily involving the newly named Rocks pirate leader, Rocks D. Zebek, and tying into the D. This video is basically going to be a theory that I have of what the D actually is, or specifically how the will of D works. Because for me, my theory is that the will of D is a living, like, entity. Not in the same vein as hockey, but that the will of D has an actual mind of its own. We don't know what the actual letter represents. We don't know a whole lot about it, but I believe that when it comes to the actual will itself, it has, well, a will of its own. That it is a living, breathing thing in the vein of Devil Fruits, where, like, it isn't just like something that's just passed from generation to generation, but like the will of D is is conscious. It actually knows what it's doing, and it influences the people. And to start off that, let's go into like basically what we know about the D as is, and like how a few examples in the story, especially recently, shows that the will of D isn't just like the ideal of will and the ideal of a dream being passed down, but it's like actually being passed down like through a physical sense. Because when it comes to like the D, what we do know for certain is that the D can be passed down from generation to generation. We see that with the Monkey family, Monkey D. Luffy, Monkey D. Garp, Monkey D. Dragon. We also know that for Trafalgar D. Walter Law, his name is the D in his name is also passed down with his family, because apparently his siblings had it as well as his parents had it, but the difference is they chose to hide it, which ties into another part that we know about the D, is that the D's are known to basically make trouble in the world, and that if you have a D in your name, then you are going to do something impactful, either start a war, starting a new era in the vein of Gold D. Roger. You are doing something in the world, and the world is changing, and it's because you have the D. So that kind of ties into, like, if you have a D, like, the world is going to change, and you're going to be a crucial part of it. And tying into, like, other families, and then you have Porcus D. Ace, who is the son of Gold D. Roger, and also Porcus D. Rouge, which is something interesting, is that for the D to be passed down from family to family, at the very least you need one, and it's very rare for you to have two. That's why when it came to Porcus D. Ace, it was so, like, we didn't know that he was Gold Roger's son until later on, is because of his name. He took the name of his mother, who so just happened to have a D. And tying into that, another thing that we do know about the D clan is that they are the natural enemies of God, which makes sense from what we've seen in the series so far. We've seen Luffy go up against God in the form of Enel, but we've also seen him go up against celestial dragons, who are also portrayed as gods in a sense. And even when it comes to that, there are multiple people within the show, not just Luffy. When Luffy punched out Charlos, he was going against God. When both Luffy and Law went up against Doflamingo, that is also, in a way, fighting against God, since God is also synonymous with the celestial dragons. And Don Quixote, Doflamingo, is technically, even though he was a former celestial dragon, he still has celestial dragon in his blood. So that makes sense for why they were able to fight against him, why they had that such great wanting urge to fight against Doflamingo. And even when it comes to those in the Marines, such as Garp, the reason why, and this is something that we learned recently, the reason why he didn't take on the mantle of Admiral is because it would mean that he would work directly under a Celestial Dragon, or work directly under Celestial Dragons, in the form of, like, if something happens to them, he has to come and save them. And that just shows that even though Garp is in the Marines, he is still being controlled by the will of D. He chooses to be a part of the Marines, but because he's a D clan, he cannot protect the dragons, celestial dragons, because they are gods, and the will of Ds are specifically against gods themselves. And a few other things that we also know about the Ds is the fact that if you have a D in your name, it means that there's a few things that ties into that. One of them is that when you die, you're not going to have a fear of death. And as well as you have somewhat of an inherited will. And there's a specific quote that I would like to read out to you that basically explains the inherited will. Inherited will, the swelling of the changing times and the dreams of people. These are the things that cannot be stopped. As long as people seek the answer to freedom, these will never cease to be. But yeah, that's basically what it means. That those who hold the will of D have somewhat of an inherited will. And whatever they choose or whatever they want, it will still remain even after their death. And that's something very important as well, because when it comes to that, as well as the wills, and when people who have the will of D, when they die with a smile on his face. Ace died when he got fisted by Akainu. Luffy was about to die in Logtown, and he had a smile on his face, even though he was about to die. Same can be said about Roger during his execution. Rouge died when she was holding Ace. She was smiling and crying at the same time. While Salt, he was laughing when Aokiji killed him. Now I think about it, 2 members of the Will of D have been killed by admirals. That's just an interesting note. And even Law, he was smiling even though he had a gun to his head, and basically Don Flamingo was going to kill him. So the only exception to that is Teach. But this is what I mean by the will has a mind of its own. It's like a living thing. It's because even though the will of D gets passed down from generation to generation, that's not the only way that it can just be passed down. It is implied that yes, it is passed down from generation to generation, but that may not be the case exactly. You may be a carrier of the D, and possibly you may not belong to the D clan by blood. And the reason why I'm saying this is because the will of D is mainly the inheriting of the will of a D holder, not necessarily through blood. And now, here's a few examples of this. One of the main examples that we've seen in the recent chapters is that Rox D. Zebek may have instilled his will into Blackbeard. And another thing that ties into the series is that the will is inherited upon birth. Because when it comes to Roger was executed around the same time that Luffy was either conceived or born. Because at this moment, he is around 19 years old. And if I remember correctly, Ace was he was around 19 when he died, 18 or 19 when he died, which kind of ties into like, it's a little bit more complicated. He was either 18 or 19 when he died, so he's around 21 now. And because he was held in his mom's room for an extended amount of time, he wasn't able to inherit the will of his father. But even though he was held in the stomach around the same time, it was also around the same time that Luffy probably could have been conceived. So it's very possible that you inherit a will of D upon your birth, which ties into Blackbeard because allegedly, we do not know this for certain, but Zebek died around 38 years ago currently. Blackbeard is around 40 years old. So, as far as we know, Blackbeard is 40, so it kind of doesn't add up, but it is still possible to inherit a will of D and still be alive. In the same vein, to explain a little bit more, how Luffy and Sabo inherited Ace's will in 2 different ways, in which Luffy may have carried it on metaphorically through his Red Hawk, but Sabo inherited that will through the devil fruit itself of the Mera Mera no Mi, which was Sabo's devil fruit. And the reason why I brought that up is mainly because as far as we know, we don't know everything about devil fruits, but we do know that they're able to reincarnate in a different fruit if it's in close proximity as soon as the person dies. But the thing is, Sabo was able to use Ace's Fire Fist after immediately consuming it. Now, we can imply that he probably may have known about Ace and may have known about his abilities, but it's very unlikely because Sabo didn't know Ace because he didn't know that they were brothers. So it wouldn't make sense that he would want to follow him and know all about him. So it's weird that he was able to know its ability and without prior knowledge of his moves. And that could imply that it was because the will of Ace was tied to the devil fruit itself and was consumed by Sabo, or at the very least, his will went into Sabo and chose to be with him, which could tie into the idea that the will of D has a conscience in a way. But tying more into Blackbeard, the ages don't match up, but he could still inherit his will, and it has shown that he probably has inherited the will, even though there's another theory that he's not a real holder of the will of D because he has shown to fear death, and that's something that people in the D clan don't do. But it's very likely that he could have inherited the will of D and then named himself Marshall D. Teach. He might not have known upon his birth that he was D, or maybe his parents just gave him the D and not knew exactly why. So it is still possible, but it seems very unlikely. But a lot more points I want to add up is the fact of the matter is that he named his main ship the Saber of Zebek. And this is important because what we learned in the previous chapter, the world government tried to wipe out any knowledge of Zebek at all. Not knowing his last name, because most people only knew him as Rocks. So why would it be a very big coincidence for Blackbeard to name his ship after Zebek, who is a will of D, who in actuality they both share the same goal of wanting to take over the world, which could be implied that Zebek's will is to take over the world and was inherited by Blackbeard in one form or another due to the fact that he knew the name even though it was supposed to be hidden. Now it is very possible that Blackbeard could have learned about it later on in life because apparently he liked history, liked learning about history, but it seems more likely that due to the fact that they have similar goals. And even better is that Blackbeard is at Pirate Island. That is his headquarters in the New World. And apparently that's where Zebek gathered his first crew on Pirate Island, also known as Beehive Island, also known as Falfland Island, or mainly known as Pirate Island. So there are too many coincidences that are tied to Blackbeard and Zebek. And the same can be said about Luffy, which makes sense because Luffy wants to be king of the pirates, and he's following a lot of Roger's footsteps due to the fact that they both have Conqueror's Haki. They both have had the Straw Hat in one moment of their life. They both seek freedom as the Pirate King. And even Rayleigh sees Roger and Luffy. And even when it comes to the path that they have gone down, apparently one crucial thing is that Roger went to Sky Island and was able to, also they have the same ability to hear all things. So in a way, it seems as if Luffy and Blackbeard are following the same path or have the same will as the people who they are parallel to. Blackbeard with Zebek and Luffy with Blackbeard. And what makes it even better is that apparently Zebek was Roger's greatest rival, and from what we know in One Piece right now, Blackbeard is possibly going to be the final boss. And if we're following these parallels, Luffy is eventually going to fight Blackbeard, but he might do it in the same way as Garp. And there could be a chance that Garp dies in the series recently, and his will gets passed on as a will of D to someone else, whether it's a newborn or whether it's someone who's in the world right now. And I predict that it's going to be Kobe, meaning that Luffy and Kobe are going to fight against Blackbeard because they're rivals in the same vein as Garp and Roger fighting their greatest enemy. So when it comes to a lot of that, what I said, I believe that when it comes to the will of D, basically it has a will of its own, where it has the ability to choose who it will inherit its will. Now, how it exactly knows this, I think it's because it's conscious. It chooses someone, either one of two things. Either it chooses someone at random, and that person just automatically will follow that will that is given to them, which is a kind of a dark thing, meaning that you may not have like a true will of your own. But what is most likely happening is that the will of D has like an ability to sense someone in the world who has the same will or has the same drive as they do, and would go into them. And by doing so, they become a member of the D clan. And chances are high enough, it's mainly going to be someone who already has a D in their name, or because it has a will of its own, it can make people into Ds. And maybe that's probably what happened with Blackbeard, where he was not initially a member of the D clan, or it could have been Zebek's son, but with all the evidence that we have, he may be a fake D. In a sense, he isn't a D born of blood, but a D born of will. The will of D purposely chose Blackbeard to carry on Zebek's will, even though he may not be an actual D clan member by blood. And in the same vein, Roger's will was inherited by Luffy. What would make this theory a little bit more concrete, and I know that there are a few holes in it, is if Blackbeard was not actually 40, but was 38. If Blackbeard was 38 currently, then this would submit this theory to be more realistic and more tangible, because it would mean that the will of D, in the similar vein as devil fruits, are inherited into someone like a new vessel that is close by, which technically, if Blackbeard was born in the new world, then technically he would be nearby, as well as like with Roger's will, who was killed in Longtown, which is the same blue that Luffy is from. So that would tie in, but that's only if Blackbeard was 38, but apparently he's 40. But who knows? As far as we know, Oda could just retcon it and say, oh yeah, Blackbeard, his age, he's 38. He's 38. So yeah, that's basically my theory, that the will of D has an actual mind of its own. It has an actual will, that it has the ability to choose who will basically become a D clan member and like what will to carry on. So all in all, that's like my thoughts. Hopefully you enjoyed my thoughts on this theory. A lot of this information is on my own, a little bit of research. I got some inspirations from a few people who were reading on the internet. I don't remember who I got a lot of this information from, but a lot of it can be found on the wiki itself. So all in all, I think this is a really good theory, and if this theory actually becomes true, I would be very excited about that, mainly because like how much lore we're getting right now, and like what lines you can connect together. And I think when it comes to the Will of D, in the same vein as people, has like a consciousness and deliberately chooses who will inherit what will. We've only seen it through Luffy, as well as in Luffy from Roger, and Blackbeard possibly through Zebek, but it could be possible that someone in the world can inherit like the will of Jaguar D. Saul, or that Ace's will kind of is inherited through Sabo and Luffy as well. Not like directly, but indirectly. And maybe in the same vein as Monkey D. Dragon, maybe he inherited the will from someone else, maybe a former revolutionary who also had a D in their name, but knew the importance of it and decided to hide it, in the same vein as Trafalgar's Law's family hid his deal away. So hopefully this video was interested you, was able to keep your attention, and I was able to get most of my points out, and hopefully I will see y'all next time for my next manga review. So until then, catch you guys later. Goodbye. Woo! Oh wow, that's... Oh, I pressed the wrong button. Bye.